Hey, welcome to Progression, Success in the Music Industry. I'm your host, Travis Ferentz, and this is episode number 88. I really think y'all will enjoy the interview this week. I sat down with Los Angeles-based session guitarist and songwriter Adam Tressler. We get into all kinds of stuff, like tips for working as a touring guitarist, as well as how losing a gig with a huge pop star allowed him to pursue projects he was actually more passionate about, how he got into playing on sessions for film scores and TV shows, some tips for working remotely as a musician, his experiences signing a publishing deal early in his career, and finally his collection of 50 different fretted instruments from all around the world, all of which he plays. So stick around for all that and plenty more coming right at you. If you've been in the music industry long enough, you've probably at least once felt like you've been stuck in a loop of the same setback. Now, most of us start to look outward and place blame on others, but I think the quickest way to break this cycle is to ask yourself one simple question. Am I learning the right lessons from my mistakes? What do I mean by learn the right lesson? I'm essentially talking about having the stomach to objectively reflect on what you've done wrong so that you can actually learn from it. Now, let's be honest. People do not like to be wrong. And just the thought of reflecting on what we did wrong is enough to make most of us cringe. But if you're unwilling to identify what actually went wrong in a situation, how are you ever going to not make that same mistake again? So the first step to learning the right lesson is to reflect on your failures. It's okay if you need a second to separate, but what's important is that you're willing to objectively reflect on what went wrong in a particular situation. Approach it as if you're giving advice to a friend, except that friend is you just a couple days earlier. The next step is to be sure you're asking yourself the right questions about what went wrong. And when you're doing this, it's important to drill down deeper into the problem so that you can really be sure you're going to learn from it. Now, if you don't know where to start with this, you can try this with a technique called the 5 whys. Now, I think it's pretty self-explanatory by the title, but you basically ask yourself why 5 times, and at that point, you should reach the root cause of the issue. Let's do an example from my career. A few years ago, I was doing a mix for an artist. I absolutely crushed it, at least I thought so. And the day after I sent the first mix, I was promptly fired from the whole album because I went in the complete wrong direction, which absolutely caught me off guard because we had had a whole conversation about what the direction was before I started. So let's run the 5 whys on this. I got fired from the mix. Why? Because I missed the vibe they were going for. Why? Because I felt like I was given free rein to do my own thing to the track. Why? Because the artist said their rough mix was just some basic levels and no real mixing. Why would they say that? Because I told them that my general philosophy is to keep the artist's vision intact and to take inspiration from the rough mix. Aha. There's the issue. I said I was going to do one thing, and then I did something completely different, all because he and I had some miscommunication. Now, I could have easily just stopped at, I missed the vibe, and not really accepted any responsibility and just chalked it up to they didn't know what they wanted. But I would have never learned the right lesson from this mistake, which in this case is to be absolutely sure that everybody is on the same page. And I've never made the same mistake again, because once you start drilling down on your mistakes like this, you'll find that you don't have repeat issues because you've actually identified the root cause and you've actually solved the problem. This is what taking a growth mindset approach to your career looks like. You're always trying to improve. You're always trying to get better, even when it's hard. Actually, especially when it's hard, because that's when you're going to grow the most. Now, it's super easy to analyze your wins. Everybody wants to sit around a table and try to figure out why a release was a huge success or why a repeat client continues to come back. And yes, there are plenty of things to learn from analyzing our successes, but I promise you that the ROI on time spent analyzing and eliminating repeated missteps in your career is going to pay off so much more in the long run. Today's guest is session and touring guitarist and songwriter Adam Tressler. Adam has performed or recorded with a long list of artists, including Aimee Mann, Selena Gomez, Lil Nas X, Camila Cabello, Huron, and plenty more. He's also played on scores for TV shows such as Modern Family, A Million Little Things, Central Park, and for films like Birds of Prey and This Is the Year. He's also amassed a collection of about 50 fretted instruments from around the world, and when he's not playing those for other people, he's writing for his own project, which is a collection of biographical songs about U.S. presidents and first ladies, so we'll definitely get into that. And so super fun one today. Welcome to the show, Adam Tressler. What's up, man? How are you?
How's it going? Doing good, Travis. Good to see you.
Yeah, dude, last time I saw you was like, man, a random engineering gig I did in the Hollywood Hills, and you walked in as the guitar player, but that was like 10 years ago. Have you been in LA that long?
That's right, yeah. I think I'm on year 12 or 13 now, so that sounds about right.
That was a minute. A lot's happened since then, but
you're right.
yeah. Dude, I want to talk about like, I was just cruising through your Instagram before we get into like your history and stuff like
Mhm.
that. I saw you playing Bonnie Raitt tune on a hammered dulcimer, Tom Petty on something called a pipa. Do you sleep or do you just stay up all night learning new instruments? Like how many things are you playing now?
Well, I mean, I think there are about 50 instruments here, and like maybe like 15 of those are guitars, and there's all these other things from around the world that I've kind of been collecting. Yeah, I'm trying to get in more like session scoring, like film scoring, so having like different textures. So like I find these cover videos are a good kind of barrier to entry to me to like learn how to play these instruments, just like some, and then
Right.
have like maybe something. So I'll kind of pick one up. I'll be working on a few at a time. Like, oh, like this week I'm playing some oud, and like trying to work up some song. And then after a few weeks, I'll record my little video for Instagram and then kind of put the oud back down. We'll see when it gets picked up again.
Are you picking these things up by ear? Because I know, like once you play guitar or any stringed instrument, you just kind of have to figure out the tuning. But are you watching videos or just messing around?
I'm watching some videos. Like I'm certainly like a guitar player that's playing these instruments, so it's not like I'm not learning all the traditional repertoire or anything. I'll watch videos to see the mechanics of what like experts how they use the instrument, but
Right.
I'm not moving to China to like join a pipa orchestra anytime soon.
That's awesome. People
Yeah.
on YouTube can see the army of random instruments behind you, which
Yeah,
is
right.
epic.
Mhm.
So it's awesome. Dude, that's great. So I'm stoked you're doing more session work than touring these days. Is that
Yeah,
because of the
yeah.
pandemic or was that something you just moved into?
I feel like it was always sort of the trajectory I imagined. I figured session work was kind of the stuff that I enjoyed the most, and it felt to me like the most appropriate for me. We'll maybe talk about it, but I kind of dabbled in the pop touring world a bit, but it just wasn't really for me, and I had to like some reality checks, that kind of were like, oh, like maybe I'll kind of step out of that hustle and kind of focus more on the one that I had been a little more interested in from the get go.
Yeah, that's a good segue. Let's pause there before we go off on every tangent in the world. And let's go back to kind of how we always start this show, which is how you got into music. We met at Berkeley,
Hmm.
but when did you pick up guitar for the first time and decide that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, when I was 10, this was like the height of Green Day's Dookie, and
Yes.
I feel like I
Yes.
had a friend whose brother played guitar, and so I started taking guitar lessons. And then after about a year, I ended up with a really great teacher who had gone to Berkeley and had like a really solid method that I really connected with. And I was with him from 11 or 12 until 18, and he really prepared me to go to college there. And over the course of that time, like I, you know, really found a love for the instrument, and then it seemed just like a very natural thing. Like, oh, like this guy went to Berkeley. Like my parents had always wanted me to go to college, and then I started going to this Berkeley summer program, and like this guy had prepared me with how they teach, so I felt like positioned, to go for it.
Yeah, totally. When did you graduate? Did you graduate with me?
2008.
2006?
I was
2008. Oh,
2008.
okay.
Yeah.
What'd you do when you were done?
I moved to New York.
Oh,
There was like a big crew of us. I'd been started playing with a lot of singer songwriters and artists at Berkeley. And, like with the Chinese bus, like it was like an easy commute so New York felt a little familiar. I always really loved LA, but hadn't really spent too much time out there. So all my friends were moving to New York, and it seemed like the thing to do, and I'm glad
yeah.
I did it. But it was just for 3 years, kind of long enough to like wet the beak, like, lived in a really grimy apartment with my friends and had a good time. And then kind of when the opportunity came to move west, I did.
That's awesome. For anybody listening, there was this Chinatown bus that was like it was cheap, right? It was like $20.
Yeah, if
It would
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Boston to New York, but I feel like you just got dropped off on like a random street corner.
They would,
It was
yeah,
always a little sketch.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was a bit of
But
a
if you
wild
were a
card.
college kid, you could get to New York, and that was the key.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
get there and back. That's awesome. When you were finishing Berkeley, were you just a performance major?
yeah, I was.
So playing guitar professionally was always the goal.
Yeah.
What were some of the first things you did? Because there's so many people out there that like they want to professionally play their instrument. Like, what
Hmm.
did you think at that time was the the best choice of how to start besides moving to New York, obviously.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I feel like I've always had a pretty pragmatic approach to doing this. So like I feel like when I had gotten to Berkeley, like, you know, they have this rating system, and, you know, like I
Oh
knew
yeah.
that like sight reading was like a valued thing in this rating system, and that would potentially be this sort of like professional skill. Like I didn't ever picture myself like being just like the guy in a band, you know, or like kind of putting all my eggs in that one basket. So like it's always been about like trying to be as diverse musically, but then just like with the opportunities that are coming to be doing as many different things as possible. So like when I moved to New York, there were 5 or 6 bands that I was already in that were playing, and, you know, we weren't like making a lot of money, but I felt like I was immediately out there performing and doing the thing. But there wasn't like too much of a recording scene like for me in New York, and I think maybe in general in New York, especially for someone in their early 20s. You know, you have to prove yourself. Like
Yeah.
you're not just going to get hired to play on any of these records, you know. So felt like I would just play live and then, you know, answer the phone when it rings and see what happens.
That rating system, man, I was like,
Yeah.
I was at the bottom of that thing. But so, okay, um, then you knew that you kind of wanted to be like a team player then. Like you never wanted to be
Hmm.
like the shredding front man, long hair
Right.
80s metal band.
Right.
Knowing like first of all, I have to say that you may be one of the only guitar players that I've talked to in a long time that can read music. I don't know what it is about guitar players. They're like, "What?
Yeah.
Read music? Fuck that."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah, so okay, so you kind of had an idea of the things that would set you up for doing what you wanted, because most people would not learn to read music, even at Berkeley.
I think there was something about even that teacher that I had growing up, like just kind of like knowing how to getting your craft together, you know. And then I wanted to do well at Berkeley. Like I enjoy like an infrastructure that has like I'm a student, you know, so I like
Right.
to do well at Berkeley. Like it kind of made sense to do the things that Berkeley values, you know. So like getting my reading together just seemed like a pretty obvious way for me to get into classes I wanted to get into, or just like be able to do those other things at college that I was trying to do, because I wasn't really gigging, you know. It's just like if I can get into these special groups that are at school, or like, you know,
Right.
it seemed like that was the way that I was going to try to do it.
That's cool. That's awesome. Did you get to do any recording session work in New York before you left, or did that all start over here?
It was mostly just, you know, the bands that I was in would be doing
Right.
things, or like maybe a handful of demo sessions, but certainly nothing like uh that's on my resume now. You
Right,
know?
right. What brought you to LA? What made you want to make that move?
I feel like I had, like I was saying, always maybe imagined it happening, and it was just a question of like how to facilitate that. And so when I moved to New York, I had started writing songs, like kind of lyrics, and I'd always, you know, come up with guitar tunes. And then one of the bands that I was, or singers that I was working with, I wrote an album of songs for her, and then she recorded the album like very well. And then so then I had this really great like kind of songwriting reel basically. And on that I fell into a publishing deal
Oh, nice.
with BMG. So like there was this was all happening in LA, but there was like this album had gotten to this guy who's signing people to this publishing company. So like I went out and I met this guy, and he in particular he liked this one song I had written, and basically on the strength of that song, he thought he was going to make something happen with it that didn't pan out. But he signed me to this deal, and then I was able to kind of use the advance money to move.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Are you still in that deal?
um, yeah. But it's like kind of I don't think for long. You know, that
No,
guy
okay.
ended up that guy left the company soon after I got out west. So like when I first got to LA, I was kind of, oh, I guess I'm like a songwriter now. Like we'll see like what kind of sessions that they'll put me in, or these co-writes, or kind of where this could lead, you know. And then
Right.
I kind of like did went through the motions of that a bit, but it just, you know, maybe I just, this guy kind of forgot about me a little bit, or, you know, he this one opportunity that he had didn't pan out, and he was like, oh, like uh you know, not too much to do with this guy anymore. So like I kind of pursued that a little bit, but always kind of knew that the more immediate, like someone needs a guitar part for a song, like they call you, you get paid that right then, or, hopefully right
Right.
then. And then songwriting is such a longer game. And then,
So long.
yeah, I mean, I've had some like marginal success there, but kind of saw just the structure of the game and how like difficult it was for these people. Like if you don't have a single, like good luck to you.
Yes. Yeah. It can be it can take forever for
Hmm.
something to like to stick. So I didn't realize that you did some of that. Were you in those like blind date songwriting sessions where it's like, hey, meet for 5 minutes and write a hit? Did you do some of that when you got
Some
out
I
here?
did, yeah, I did some of that. I feel like this guy that signed me knew I was more of like a singer songwriter type, so they were putting me with other singer songwriters.
Okay.
Like I did end up getting into that pop world, like through a gig I had on guitar. The artist was working a lot with this songwriter that, I became close with him, and then he started bringing me in. So that was like the only like kind of like I had two like Demi Lovato cuts with these guys, and that was
Gotcha.
kind of the only time that I've had like a big placement.
Pop hit.
Pop placement. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it was fun working with those guys, and like I valued that time and was grateful for those opportunities. But I feel like the guitar always just seemed like a more like familiar way for me to be making a living at this.
Yeah. Well, here's a question, and you can answer this in whatever politically correct manner you'd like to answer it. I feel like a lot of people they'll jump on a pub deal. Like I feel like a lot of younger artists will like rush to it because it'll pay their rent for 6 months or help them
Hmm.
move like you did. And then I think they don't realize how attached they are to like one A&R guy
Hmm.
or girl and how that person can just disappear. Like looking back, would you re-sign that deal or would you approach it differently, or did it pan out enough for you? And you don't have to like badmouth the guy. I'm just curious
Yeah.
what your experiences are.
For me, it was all about being able to facilitate that move. And I
Yeah.
think like, I mean, like I had, of course, these people kind of put these big dreams in your head, but to me, it always seemed like something I kind of like fell into, and it was never going to be like maybe it would have been in some alternate world, but like I didn't anticipate it becoming like the job. And then once things started to kind of not be, I wasn't getting too much support from these people. Like I was like, oh, at least I have this other thing that I can do. And that's the thing I always kind of figured I was going to do. And this had been this kind of detour that was
Yeah.
welcome, so I probably would have done it. It was exciting, like, but I don't think that I would like encourage necessarily like anyone to just jump into one of those things. Cause I did kind of fall into that scenario you're talking about. Like this guy, soon after he signed me, he left the company. Then I kind of got passed between these few people, and like, you meet with these people, they don't really know what to do with you.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like gung ho about this anyway, like I needed collaborators. Like I wasn't going to just give them that next like Demi Lovato song. Like they needed to put me in a room so I could, you know, provide. I was still basically playing guitar, just coming up with riffs and form stuff.
Yeah. That's because I did so many sessions with songwriters, for years and years and years. And I definitely saw like a lot of younger writers because it would always be the younger, newer signings that I would do the sessions with because they wouldn't have like their home studio because they didn't have their Katy Perry cut or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
And so they'd be always the ones coming through. And I feel like generally there was a mixed opinion about like who they were working with or whether they were happy they signed the deal, even though like they got it because they had 2% of, I don't know, Nicki Minaj track or
Right.
something like that because they were in the room. And then you kind of get lost in the fray unless you're one of those people that's like delivering song and song and song and hit and hit and hit. I don't know. I think a lot of people think that a publishing deal is going to just put them in the rooms that they imagine they're going to be in. And that's just not what I saw. And it sounds like that's your
Yeah.
experience too.
Yeah, definitely. And like I remember understanding that because like I was an unproven writer. Like sure I
Yeah.
had like they assigned me or whatever, but once I got these Demi Lovato cuts, which was like maybe 6 years into my deal, and it was through, an opportunity that I had fully like manifested, like they had
Yeah,
nothing to do with
exactly.
these people. And then I remember meeting with them, like hoping to kind of look, I did it myself, like maybe now like you guys can like use that to like help me get more sessions like this, if this is going to work, and then, yeah, sure, we'll do that. And then it just kind of like, and I get it, it's like, if like a lot of the bigger writers only want to write with bigger writers,
the
and
other bigger writers.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. There was a funny thing when I was working with songwriters, you could always tell like who was more excited to write with who.
right,
You're like,
right.
like this, some people would be like, okay, yeah, I'm working with this guy. And the other guy would be like, I'm working with this guy.
Right, right. I mean, I remember like this one writer that I worked on a lot of this music with was so impressive to me, like how he could just like be coming like a top liner, just really coming
Oh,
up
yeah.
with brilliant melodies, like great lyrics, just quickly. And I could just tell that like, oh, like that's not me. I'm lucky to be here, like that they needed like a guitar riff to write to, but
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be that same trajectory for me, I don't think.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive. Some of those really talented writers, how fast they can come up with something
Hmm.
that's really good.
Yeah.
And then they'll tweak it like as they go, but you're just like, whoa. Anyway, so we've been talking about publishing deals for like 5-10 minutes. So for our audience, publishing deal, 50-50, flip a coin, make the decision for yourself.
Yeah. Right.
I did want to ask you a question as a guitar player, and it kind of sounds like it plays into some of your songwriting experience. Do you ever feel like you're in sessions coming up with parts that you believe are part of the songwriting process, or sometimes as a player, do you just come up with parts understanding that you're not going to be, quote, a songwriter on that track? Did I phrase that question properly?
Yeah, totally. Like, and I feel like it really comes down to like what they've called you for.
Right.
Like on these two Demi Lovato songs, like one of them was just like fully a riff that I played when I first plugged in the studio that day. Like the other one was like, oh, like we think we like these two chords, but we need something to kind of like a loop basically that we can build this song around, So they called me both those times, like as a writer. I find like, because it is a bit of a blurry line a lot of times, especially with
It
pop
is.
music where like, we're just writing like these same progressions like over and over again. And then like if my guitar riff is the thing that makes your like 1 to 5 progression like pop, then there's some part of me that feels like I should be like that should be like valued in that
Yeah.
way. But I feel like if you don't, it's just so hard to get it after the fact, because you're then like fighting up against like the publishing world, and if you don't, God help you, if you haven't set it up before like the song comes out, then you're like, it's just,
Definitely not happening then.
it's definitely not happening then,
Yeah.
like or you're going to spend all your way too much resource and energy, like trying to rectify that.
Yeah. Do you have any advice to like younger players on like how to handle that situation, like where you might feel like you are a songwriter versus a player? Do you kind of have to read the room, or is it what do you think? It's
Yeah, I mean,
tricky.
I'm such a non-confrontational person that like I feel like I would say just try to put that out there as soon as you can. Like if it's not in the room of the session, if that's going to feel awkward for you, then like maybe like that night or the next morning you reach out to those writers and just make sure that like they're already doing the mental calculations on splits and what could happen with this down the line. So you just want to make sure that no one's surprised by your request, and you can have a
Yeah.
conversation there. You're not going to like spring this on them like when the song's like, nobody cares unless the song's something's happening with it, and like we were just saying, like by then it's too
Sure.
late, so like
Yeah.
even before the song kind of goes beyond the writing, to try to get the stand up for yourself, which
Yeah.
I'm not very good at, but I would encourage others to do it.
Well, it's so hard because, it feels like a big industry to people that are like trying to get into it, but
Hmm.
it's really small. I mean,
Sure.
like just the fact that we ran into each other at some random artist's house in the hills tells you how
Hmm.
like how small it is. So yeah, there is such a delicate line of like kind of advocating for yourself and being the prick that nobody wants to work with. Be like, well, don't call so and so. He always wants 20% just for sitting there and blah blah blah. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And yeah, it's tough. It's tough to be kind of find that balance. But
Yeah, I mean, I will say that like if I go in and they are, okay, we have these two chords and we just need the guitar riff, like I wouldn't necessarily think that even if I do come up with that signature melody or like, and if they're not pulling like melodic hooks from it, or like if it's not becoming then part of the production, like I understand that they're maybe just calling me as a guitar player, you know,
Yeah,
and
totally.
you don't certainly like don't feel like entitled to it, you know,
Yeah.
unless like they're conceiving the song when you're in the room, then like obviously that's a big difference.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like a
Yeah,
pretty clear defining line is if you're in the room when the concept is coming together versus coming into the room later in the day to throw down an overdub because they're like, they need somebody to help them get an idea out. Is like very
right,
different things.
totally.
So,
And I think like producers probably like have learned this lesson, you know, like back in the day, obviously like the producer was like functioning more as like a some kind of band leader like at the board, and then after decades of them like coming up with the beat that become, it's like they have to, their producer, like the producer is now like such a creative job, you know, it's not as passive as I think it probably was back in the day when you needed other musicians to be making those sounds.
it's become the multi-instrumentalist job.
Yeah,
It's like unless you're not the producer unless you can put the whole track together and
yeah,
in 2 hours, which is crazy. I mean, I get it, but it's very different from the way that it was. It's
hmm,
nuts. But there's so many things you can pull from that old school era, like just understanding like when to bring other players in, understanding how to interact with those players. Because a good like a Quincy Jones or something like that is going to solve the problem that you and I are talking about
hmm,
before it even comes up. He's going to be like, hey, this person needs to get a percentage because they're contributing, or this person's here to play guitar and we just need to sing him something, you know?
yeah, right.
There's a lot of, I don't know. I like it when I work with a producer that's got some of that old school, but then they can also just like grab every instrument in the room and you're like, wow, you're
Oh
on it.
yeah, yeah, you understand why they are where they are.
Yeah. So let's talk touring for a second. When did you land your first tour where you were just like clearly the sideman and not a band member?
I feel like when I moved to LA, I was lucky. You know, the people, I had graduated from Berkeley 3 years before this, so a lot of my friends had moved to California and had put in 3 years of kind of like grunt work, really, so that when I show up, like there's at least like uh you know, there's stuff to do. There was
Yeah.
people that I knew that were putting together bands for, you know, it was like YouTube stars. So like I feel like the first, like, you know, that was the time, like 2013 or something like that. I was in a band with some YouTube star, and then we like did like a 3 month tour opening for a pop person. And that was kind of
That's awesome.
my first bus, you know, the first like time really seeing a lot of these places, and like kind of just being paid like a weekly rate instead of some sort of like back east, like we're going to drive to DC to do this gig, and like we'll maybe everyone gets like $100, you know, but you get a free trip to DC or something.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for people that want to get on that touring train, whether it be how to be a good band member or how to get noticed in an audition? Like, are there things that you did that helped you or hurt you? Anything that you can help people out with?
I mean, it seems that the newest crop of people are, there's so much more like media savvy. I know that
Mm.
like having like, you know, your Instagram page is basically your resume, you know, so like having things like you have to show yourself doing your thing, because if your Instagram is just like artistic, you know, photographs of sunsets or something like that, like employers will check that out. Like they're going to send like 5 Instagram accounts to the managers or the artists, and they're going to a
Oh,
lot of times
wow.
choose from that. You know, it's not so much the audition anymore, you know. And you know, it's, you just have to be a good hang, you know, like it's really like, yeah, like being like, I was lucky, the people I was reconnecting with that were putting me on these gigs were people I was friends with and people that I just knew socially. I never was the guy that was like, I never got like a nailed a cattle call audition, you know, like to me it always had to be like paired with, this guy is cool, like this guy is not going to cause any problems, like professional, you know, instead of like blowing everyone away necessarily when I walk into the audition, because I know that like I lack the certain like rock star stage presence, you know, and that was ultimately kind of one of the main factors of me not pursuing that world more than I did. You know, like I kind of we could talk about it. Like I got like I kind of my biggest one was I joined Selena Gomez's band, and this was 2016
Yeah.
because I knew and was friends with the musical director, and they needed somebody. There was no audition, you know, it was just kind of like they called me, and then I did it for a while, and then I thought I was going to be doing this full, you know, 16-month world tour. I had gotten the spreadsheet with the routing, and I thought like, oh, rehearsals are going to start in 3 months. Rehearsals are going to start in 2 months. Rehearsals are going to start in a month. Like I should probably be hearing something about like where to go or what the music is. And then I found out that like basically they had replaced me in this band, you know.
Oh my
Be,
God. And nobody
um,
said anything?
no one said anything until it was already done, and
Jesus.
it was primarily because that of like the kind of um, stage presence, which I understand. Like the guy that they hired, like definitely was the right choice if that was the main concern, you know. But I kind
Right.
of took that as a bit of a sign that like, you know, maybe I'm not the guy that's going to be doing that, succeeding at that job, and maybe I'll
Yeah.
just, you know, shift my focus to where I'm in the room with an engineer and a producer. You know, I'm not required to smile or remember dance moves or the kind of the parts of the job that never really like were that comfortable for me. You know.
Was it Selena Gomez that you did one of the late nights with that did I
Yeah, I
see you
think
on like some
my
one of those
last
shows?
gig was Saturday Night Live with
Oh,
her.
sick.
Yeah,
Nice.
so I feel like I went out
Yeah, if you're
on a
gonna
kind of good
go
one.
out that
Yeah,
way, right?
yeah,
Playing
yeah.
SNL. That's cool. That's something you said that I hadn't thought about is the social media thing because like I know it's so big when like brands are looking for people or even movies are looking for like actors. Do you think like the follower count is coming into play when you're putting a band together for like one of these newer artists? Have you heard anybody being like, "Oh yeah, get this person, they're great on the internet."
I mean, I'm sure it can be a factor, you know, but I don't
Somebody
think
somewhere is talking about it.
yeah, I don't think it's at least the musical directors that I am friends with don't value it to that degree because that stuff can
Okay.
also you can also like kind of game that system a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit like and you know it's people want to see you playing with other musicians too. I think like I do worry that some of the like self-recording like solo guitar focused like social media stuff like isn't necessarily the best example of how you're gonna, you know, play like eighth notes in a band, you know. So I feel like you want to have all kinds of stuff up there, like videos of you playing with a band and like, you know, whatever you can. But it
Yeah.
does matter, certainly.
Yeah. Well, it's something else that you mentioned that and you mentioned it kind of passed over it a couple times. Is it sounds like your network from Berkeley and from New York and since you've come out here is really like the core of what your career is built on is your
Certainly.
relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you find that anywhere. I mean, like most of my work now is it's totally freelance, you know. So and you just kind of build up a network of people that are calling you over years, you know, and they might each only individually call you like once a year or something like that. But you know, if you make your good impression and they value you, then you have enough. You build up enough of those over time that to keep yourself busy, I suppose.
Get the revolving door of regular clients. You got
Yeah,
300 people that call you once a year, then
yeah, right.
you're probably
Sitting pretty.
overworking yourself.
Yeah,
But
totally.
dude, let's talk session musicians and how you broke into that because I worked at Capitol for a long time and it was lots of like the old school session musicians like George Deering's, Dean
Right.
Parks, and all those players. And so like when I think session musician, I'm always thinking like the old these people that have been playing for like 30, 40 years. They're playing on Steely Dan records and shit like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
How do you squeeze your way into that circle, like piece by piece? Because I know now you're doing like film scores, and the film scores are the ones where you really see those old school guys. So
Totally.
you've really kind of pushed your way politely, well, not pushing, but you've gotten in the door, which I think is awesome. Um, how did you go about it?
I mean, it's very slowly you push through the door, I suppose, you know, is the answer. But
Just
like,
creaking open.
yeah, yeah, yeah. One foot, one like toe hold in, like, hey, I'm still here. Um, I think, I mean, it started with I was doing more like record dates, you know, and then I always wanted to do that. I mean, a lot of it is the people that I knew that were film scorers that I moved out here. Those first few years they're pursuing their career, they're not really in a position to hire anybody, but you maintain those relationships just naturally because you're friends. Then like 4 or 5 years later, when they are in a position to call people, like they might call you instead of calling George Deering because they know you want to do that. Like they want, there's, that rising tide thing is like so true.
Totally, totally true.
Yeah. And I, the film stuff is, it's really, there's just a few companies that really do it, So like, how do you get to know these people, these companies, like when they're calling these same players over and over again? And
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was like, just playing original music with an artist who's like had a family connection at one of these companies. So then like I kind of met the family connection like in a very seemingly like organic way. And then they saw me play a few times. Maybe they liked my personality enough to like give me a chance to do some of that work. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm still kind of in that category of like they'll occasionally give me a chance to do that sort of work. It's not like it's still going to go to these other people before it comes to me a lot of times, but you just biding like people retire, like people are busy, so like you kind of
Yeah.
just hope that you position yourself in a way that you're able to be there when they need it, And that was another thing, like not going too into the touring world, is that I knew that my favorite opportunities were the ones that were coming when I was in town, like a fun record date or some local thing that was interesting.
Yeah.
When you're on the road and you get those calls, like I was really like, it hurt to have to say no to any of that sort of work because those people were only calling me once every 4 months. And then if I say no that time, like who knows, like if they'll even think of me the next time, if you're known as somebody that's always on tour, or like if that's the impression that you're giving out.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was all like a natural connection through friends.
Yeah. Well, that's something that I've seen so many people have to fight with, like where you gain traction as a producer or a songwriter or something, and then you got to go back on the road with the band that you're in,
Hmm.
or got to go do front of house or something, and all of a sudden, like you have to say no for like 6 months, and
Right.
yeah, it can be tough. Oh, I wanted to clarify for myself and the audience. You said companies. Are you talking about contractors that are putting bands together for shows and film?
Yeah, like there's a few. Yeah, the music contracting companies are the ones
Got it.
that do the big stuff. Like a lot of what I'm doing is more TV or like indie films. And where like the composer is maybe making those calls themselves. But at a certain point, like they hire these contractor companies to put together an orchestra, or
Right.
like the vibe of this one's going to be like guitars and things like that. So then they'll find maybe an individual for them.
I never thought of the contractors as being companies, but they probably are because they're putting together like orchestras. What was that one guy that did everything? Name one guy that does everything.
Peter Rotter.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
he
He
was
has a
always doing
company.
everything at
Yeah.
Capitol. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. You're
Yeah.
you're doing a lot of gigs. You would be a company, but yeah, that's
Hmm.
funny. I never made that connection. They were
Hmm.
just like individual people. Well, we're kind of like touching on union stuff, and I wanted to ask you about union stuff as a musician. Do you think there's a point when a musician should join the union when they're in a city like New York or LA? Should they do it in the beginning, even when they're not doing TV shows and record dates, or should they wait?
I would say, like, all due respect to the union, like they haven't like made themselves necessary. Um, and they do a lot of valuable, like with the film work, certainly, like they have a more of a foothold in making sure the musicians like are taken care of with, uh, all their rules that people respect, but like most of the work that I'm doing is not union. And like
Yeah.
even a lot of the early TV shows, like the first year they run, like a lot of times they're not union. So I think it can be valuable maybe as like a social world, maybe that like you're able to, there's people that are there that have experience that you could talk to and meet that you might not otherwise find those chances for, but like
Yeah.
I'm still not a member of the
Oh, you're not?
LA. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I pay
Oh,
my dues when they come up, but like I still haven't made, for whatever reason, I've just kind of avoided the final step.
yeah. I mean, I've definitely run into a lot of situations in my time where, like, I mean, a movie that I worked on years and years and years ago with this guy, they did like a toy based on, like a little microphone where you would sing along. But we had to take the mixes and redo the mixes for the toy because the union wanted too much money
Mm,
for the toy or something like that. So we had to mute all because it was a full orchestra in this.
mm,
So we had to mute the full orchestra and bring in the fake orchestra again just for the toy. And then it's like I feel like there's a fine balance between defending the musician's rights and making sure they're getting paid and then potentially pushing the gig to like the UK or to Europe or whatever it
sure.
is. And I'm talking more of an orchestra thing, but yeah, I don't know. I that's kind of the way most people about the musicians union are. They're kind of like, yeah, it helped sometimes and not other times.
And I'm sure like maybe it's just the calls that I'm getting, versus if you were like a trombone player or something, like you're just naturally going to be more of like a an ensemble team player type
Yeah,
thing. Like the guitar, not so much. And a lot of composers play guitar themselves, or
it's
so
true.
you just got to find the ones that play piano.
You keep buddy with those.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Before we kind of leave the session world, are there I always have to ask for the top tip of everything, right? Is there like one or two tips that you could give to people that are about to start doing some sessions maybe or they think or that's what they want to do? Obviously, reading music is probably towards the top, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, reading music, like I think rhythm guitar, like most of what you're going to be doing is rhythm guitar and like learning to layer simple parts. Like I never felt like too oppressed by the like jazz knowledge that I had kind of picked up, like but I think some people maybe want to express overexpress their musicality, so I find that like if you have good tone and good time and like can make a few layers of yourself, like if you can double yourself, like it's all things that just make it faster for the
Yeah.
engineer, and if you're able to do the job in an hour that they might have to spend like an hour and a half or 2 hours trying to like, or maybe an hour, you have to spend an hour later fixing it, so that the whole job is to prevent that effort, so like trying to layer yourself, and like I mean I've picked up a lot of these other instruments and just kind of having like an ear for texture, things that
Yeah.
make things stand out because they don't probably need you to play something impressive, but they want to sound good, um,
Yeah.
and be in time,
What about like the like tone or, pedal work and stuff like that? Cuz I feel like, like you're talking about a lot of these parts are simple. Do you get to kind of shape the texture to fit things into the piece or the track more often?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, like I love making the special effects and using pedals to create, any kind of atmosphere. Um, so you can kind of get it in there, but especially if a composer sends me an episode's worth of cues to record, like they pretty much have it mapped out there. Like I'm just trying to make that MIDI like sound like the real thing, so like and not getting too creative. And if I'm doing it remotely, I want to avoid the back and forth. So like I feel like I've always kind of enjoyed like simple, like clean guitar parts.
Yeah.
If you or the composer wants to like mess with it later, then like let you guys do that instead of trying to assert that
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
regardless of what
Yeah.
I think like it might sound like best eventually.
I wanted to ask you about remote sessions. So I'm glad you brought that up. What kind of stuff do you send back? Do you send like I send a DI and an amp, or I send just my microphone, or I have a couple options? Do you kind of give people more stuff than they need, or do you find it better to like shrink it down to like this is the guitar part?
It kind of depends, but I feel like if it's a client I've worked with a lot, then you know what they want. So maybe
Yeah.
you kind of pare back what you send them because it's too much if you just send them like here's like, you don't want to seem like you're not confident in what you're sending, you know? So like, here's the guitar part. Like, if it's wrong, like I'll redo it today, you know, but like, I'm not going to send like, here's every pass I did on the guitar. Like, I think like the verse on this one was better. So like, maybe you want to comp it. It just like, you don't want to make more work for anyone. So I feel like I send
Yeah.
more if I am less clear on what they want, but I'm more inclined to send like extra kinds of parts versus like different tones with the same part or whatever else. You know, like it's more like, oh, like I decided to do some swells because I thought maybe it like kind of adding more to it without sending like redundant stuff.
Right. Right. Do you ever record a DI on your side in case they want a different tone? Or maybe you're even in the box. Are you using amps or are you in the
I'm in the
computer?
box. Yeah, I use like a amp sim like effects box that I've used for a
Nice.
few years. So like often I'll send a dry one. I use a plug-in reverb primarily. So like I'll
Okay.
send that dry. But if it has like tremolo on it or like some other even distortion, I'll normally just kind of send it with it, or I'll ask ahead of time if they want the DI, like I can do that. But I feel like most people, they want it to sound pretty good when they pull it up. They don't want to have to like play with an amp sim on their own end. Like maybe they'll add extra distortion or EQ it some way, compress it. I don't really. I'm not a very good engineer, so like I find that I send what to me seems like a good capture of the audio,
Yeah.
and then like even especially acoustic instruments, like I'm not really sending them with anything. I record like a tiny bit of compression and then just like let them do their thing on it.
Yeah. Do you have let's do some gear talk. What's desert island guitar for you? Like if you could only have one.
I use basically the same electric guitar like exclusively on
Oh, okay.
like especially live stuff. I have this black Telecaster that I got from Fender for that SNL gig. So it was kind of like my parting gift.
There you go.
But I use that on every gig. I don't bring multiple guitars, even on my current touring gig. I have like one as a backup if I break a string, but I'll play the whole set on the same guitar.
Nice.
So that's a black Telecaster that I love. I have like a Martin acoustic that is probably my favorite guitar for recording and just being at home and writing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What have you found like microphone for your acoustic guitar for like the kid that wants to record guitar at home? Like do you have any tricks as a musician? Because like an engineer thinks about it very differently. Like I'm going to put the mic here and I'm going to use the most expensive thing I can have. How do you like to get acoustic guitar sounds as an acoustic guitar player?
You know, because I don't, I'm not much of an engineer and I also don't really care too much about gear. Like I feel like generally I've never been interested, like even in guitars, like I don't know about wood or pickups or electronics. Like I
I
like,
love
so
it.
basically like when I moved to LA, this is one of those things. I got a phone call like asking if I had the capability to record remotely, and I didn't. I don't know what I had, like probably nothing really. And then I said yes. And then I called a friend of mine who had recently, another guitar player who had bought kind of like one good chain. Like he bought like a good preamp, a good compressor, and a microphone. And I
Yeah.
asked him what he bought because I know he had done a lot of research. And then I just bought the exact same stuff, which is what I used pretty much exclusively for like 8 or 9 years. And then recently I changed like the microphone I use on acoustic guitars, but otherwise it's still like the same. You know, I bought like a lunchbox and
Yep.
just like some API gear and just like kind of that's just been it, you know, and I don't really have a lot of like curiosity, you know, for better or worse,
Right.
to like it seems to be working fine and I'm happy with it. Like so I just don't change it.
You know, it is particularly in guitar, it's in the fingers. Like when you
Sure.
play guitar, it sounds like you. When my buddy plays a guitar, it sounds like him. And then I give him another guitar, it still sounds like him. Like it doesn't really matter. Like if it's the right part and it's a good performance.
Sure.
I mean, an SM57 sounds great on acoustic
Totally.
guitar, especially for like a strumming thing. Like I've done
Totally.
that a million times. So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, you can't be like intimidated by what other people are using, you know, like it's just you're trying to capture the sound, and like you realize that like a lot of really top people are using very rudimentary gear, you know, and I feel like
Oh yeah.
once that lesson started to dawn on me, I felt like more secure in what I was doing, because even if it doesn't sound like radio ready when I record it, like someone like you is going to take it and like do something that I can't really imagine and make it that way, you know?
Yeah. There was a session drummer who had a studio. I don't know if he still has the same one. We'll leave his name out because I'm gonna throw him under the bus. But he did a bunch of drum stuff, and it would be like send him the files, and he'd send you the files back. And there was a couple times where we went down just for fun to just like record with him.
Mhm.
And so I was engineering. I mean, everything was like set up, and there's like the knee for kick and snare, and knee for this, and there's like 4 or 5 knees, and I was like, where's the hi-hat and the toms and stuff? And he's like, it's under the desk. And like I look under the desk, and there's like a Mackie mixer like shoved in the back. And I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was an interesting acoustic guitar placement, and I can't take any credit for this because I saw it when I was an assistant at Capitol. It was a T-Bone Burnett session, probably with Mike Prasante engineering. But they wanted it to be like this really casual, like open space that people could like write in. And I don't know if they do this all the time, or if they do it, or if they did it because of, what they wanted, but they came over the shoulder.
Mhm.
And so like, if you're strumming guitar like this, the mic comes in like here, and it kind of like looks down at the strings, like where you would be strumming. This is a great opportunity for anybody listening to watch the YouTube video. And it sounds like, as a guitar player, because I play guitar myself, barely compared to you, it sounds so natural. You should try it sometime, because you'll be
Yeah.
like, oh shit, this is what my guitar sounds like to me, because that's where the mic is.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's really an interesting thought, you know, like I wouldn't, it's
Yeah.
like, I'm primarily recording like one mic here, sometimes like two. So I don't tend to like get too experimental. Like, I just kind of, I've been seen enough engineers put the microphone on the guitar that you kind of just put it there, and
There,
then,
where
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. It's interesting. You should check it out. You can't breathe though. I think, actually, now that I
yeah,
think
sure.
about it, I think it was so that everybody could sing. I bet that's why they put it there. Anyway, it
Right.
doesn't matter. But it is a cool sound. It is a cool
I
sound.
bet.
But you can experiment with it on your next President's record, which we can talk about.
Right. Yeah,
We gotta talk about your music before we go.
sure.
Um, so you must be a history buff if you're writing songs about past presidents.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've always, well, I wouldn't say always. When I was in Boston for college, I got a library card, and kind of wasn't too much of a reader prior to that, but like really just kind of became a reader like while I was in college. And I also have a bit of like a methodical spirit, and I thought like maybe a way for me to learn like a cursory American history would be to read a biography of every president in order. And there was a series of books that had like been out that had all of the presidents, so I mostly did those, and they were all pretty short. So I just kind of got into learning about the presidents in particular.
It's
And
interesting.
so then, like, as I was starting to write songs, like at one point I just kind of wrote a song about William Henry Harrison, who had a very short presidency. And I was like, oh, this guy was president for 31 days. Like, I should write like a short song about his whole life, And then I liked the song, and it kind of came easy, just like, you instead of like going through a diary looking for your feelings, like you're going through a history book looking for like some sort of interesting fact that you can somehow. So I would like, I take notes when I read these books, and then look at my notes afterwards as if it's a diary, and kind of like, oh, what can I like shape out of this person's story, or the things that I find the most interesting about it.
That's awesome.
And then, it's one of those things like once you start doing something that's pretty niche, like it's pretty easy to stay there. Like people like, oh, like this guy knows about presidents, so like we'll talk to him about that. Or, once I put out one album, I was like, oh, like that was fun. Like I'll do another one. So I'm like, now I'm working on the fourth one of these albums now. And just kind of, maybe it's easier than tapping into my own emotional whatever's going on, just to be
Right.
like, oh, I can sing about like Martin Van Buren and no one's really going to tell me I'm wrong, or, like they maybe will learn something about Martin Van Buren.
That's amazing. Have you
Yeah.
ever thought, like, if you write a song about every president, are you ever afraid you're gonna have to wait like 4 years for new material? That's
I've
kind of
found,
a dad joke, but
yeah, yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, I mostly write about people that are dead already. Like, I feel like I've only written about one living person, and most of the ones even that I've written about are like the first album was called Lesser Known Presidents. So I feel like I've always liked talking about uh, the underappreciated ones that no one really knows about.
yeah,
I feel like you're writing a song about like George Washington. It's like hard not to feel like a little like just like a laudatory, or like this guy was so great. Like it's more like, let me talk about like Martin Van Buren's nicknames, or like something else that's like a little narrower.
right,
And
right.
I did the first ladies, so it's like, oh, like I can, these are people that maybe if you know anything, maybe you've heard their name or something like that. But if you listen to one of these songs, they are factually correct. It's not like Schoolhouse Rock. It's like pretty earnestly produced music,
Right.
but it is like inherently like a little ridiculous, and I am okay with that. I
That's
accept it.
awesome. No,
Yeah,
I love it. It's under your name, right? If people want to
yeah,
go,
yeah.
okay,
Hmm.
yeah. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that.
Yeah,
But I think it's cool. Everybody needs their thing. It's like you need a outlet. I mean, this podcast has become an outlet for me
sure.
to do something that isn't directly related to what I do every day. Although this is directly related to what I do every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It's like you just need the thing that's for fun. And
yeah.
yeah, it's because man, when you're like in this industry, it can wear you out,
Totally.
I'm
And
sure you felt that way.
totally. And I think too that because this music's so niche, like I've always liked writing the songs. I love producing these records and doing it, but I never really have like uh too much of an ambition. Like I never thought that I was going to tour on my own music, which I did once because I was like playing guitar with somebody that needed an opener. But like I'm not like gonna spend money like promoting this music really. Like it's more, it's totally like my own thing, and like I love when people listen to it or have a reaction to it, but there's really like zero expectation for it. And I think like having such a niche kind of makes that even like a little easier, because if I was
Right.
writing pop music and no one was listening, then like, oh man, I'm really like not, I don't know, not doing something right here maybe. But like if I'm writing songs about like William McKinley, then like it's kind of justifiable that maybe you're not going to hear it on the radio, or it's not getting placed like on Grey's Anatomy or something like that.
Totally. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
There's one more question that I love to throw at people that went to music school. Obviously, it sounds like your experience going to music school was super influential. It sounds like your whole network was based on it. It sounds like you like to learn that way as well. It sounds like you're more of a traditional learner.
Sure.
Do you think music school plays the same role now that it did almost 20 years ago when you and I went? Yeah, I mean, because we're talking about significantly more expensive.
Sure.
I mean, it's a different landscape. Would you do it again if you started over?
I mean, because I've had people, that are considering Berkeley ask me that. And I think, like you were just saying, like my whole social and like career network was based on the people that I met when I was there. And I think like Berkeley, for whatever it is, like does draw in people that like if you make natural connections to these people, like it's going to benefit you down the line. Like you're not like I'm not a networker. Like I wouldn't be able to like go to a mixer and like make a genuine connection with these people. But because we went to college together, and it's like these people are doing all kinds of work. Um,
Yeah.
it's just a natural like network for you to tap into, that I think there is still a lot of value in that, but I don't know if it's like as, I don't know. I mean, people are still going, like it's still going to draw, like Berkeley's still going to draw those people to it, and then they're going to spread out and do their thing, and if you maintain those like just genuine friendships with these people, it's not like a forced industry connection.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree on the network thing because I mean, it's so many people that I knew when I moved to LA. You know, you and I is so many people I run into that I haven't seen in like 10 years even. And I'm like, oh yeah, you know, we were at school together or whatever. I mean, and in like from an engineering side, like it made sense to have access to the equipment and to like learn that way and have hands
Sure.
on. But yeah, the network is, I would say, nearly invaluable. Yeah, I don't know. I've had these thoughts about college a lot since I have a daughter now, and I talked about this on another
Mhm.
episode a few months ago. And it's like, would I encourage her to go to like a school that is, you know, tapping into as expensive as some of these places are? And you're like, you really have to get it's what you put in. And the way you
Mhm.
were describing your Berkeley experience, you kind of it sounded to me like you knew what you wanted to get out of it. And so
Definitely.
you put in the effort in the places that would give you that. And I think a lot of people when they go to like an art school or like film school or something, they're just kind of there because they're a guitar player or they like to do camera. And I don't think it pans out very well on the backside of that price tag if that's your approach
Totally.
to it. So
Totally. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, like it seemed like there were plenty of people that maybe they're like my parents, like they wanted me to go to college, and this was like the college that, oh, like I'm a guitar player, so like I want to go to guitar college, but then you get there, and then it's like if you're not interested in the, the learning of it, and you just want to kind of stay in your room and play guitar for 4 years, like you could really those people just like move to LA and like skip the save yourself that bill, you know? And like if you're
yeah,
not gonna like really like embrace what these schools can offer.
yeah,
And you know, the people that you meet, like, yeah, I wanted to be in these specific bands at school or whatever. And then the people because I had to work hard to get there, it's like the people that are there, you know, you're really meeting like the top people at those schools because
yeah,
there's like it's still a hierarchy. Like there's still like, I mean, there were 800 guitar players at Berkeley when we were there, you know, like not too many of them were like really pursuing these sorts of opportunities. And like I knew that I wasn't like the best at this school, but I think, you know, I knew that I could like do well in the infrastructure that was there. Like I like being
yeah,
a student, like yeah, like do these ratings auditions or whatever, and like you kind of can give the impression that you earned it, that you deserve to be there, whether or not, you know, you've tricked them
yeah.
all.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I think your approach to it's spot on. People that are considering going to music school should just go through everything that Adam said and sit down and think about what you're trying to get out of it. And I think that applies to any college, really.
Sure.
Except for maybe I don't know studying history or math or something where it's memorizing and learning. But
Yeah.
anyway, I've got a couple questions I ask everybody before we leave. One of them is a new one. I don't know if you've heard this one, but it's like a music recommendation. Are there any artists or players or anybody that you think just need more people to listen to them? Like, is there anything really dope that you love right now?
He's not even that unknown, but like my friend Theo Katzman, who he's in the Van Wolfpack, um,
Okay,
and he is just on his own like a very brilliant songwriter, multi instrumentalist, and he's put out a few records the last few years that I think are really great. Like another one of my best friends, Drew Taubenfeld, who's another guitar player that went to Berkeley at the same time, but he's been putting out these beautiful like solo guitar sort of arrangements, and he and I are always
cool.
kind of talking to each other about how do we find people to listen to our stuff. So I think people
Right
that
here.
listen, yeah, your podcast listeners would probably enjoy some just beautiful instrumental music.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll put links in the show notes to both
Yeah,
both of them, and I'll check them out myself because it's kind of a selfish question. I just want new music to listen to.
yeah, I hear you.
But anyway, the last two questions. The first one being, was there a time in your career that you decided to redefine what success meant to you?
I was thinking about this, and I went back to that to finding out I lost that Selena Gomez job, and
Yeah.
how like prior to that, like, you know, I kind of fell into this pop guitar world backwards, but like I was like, oh, like maybe this is my foot in the door and this is going to be my like career going forward. And I remember feeling like very like a little embarrassed and just like unmoored when I found out that that wasn't going to be like my year, you know. And then you're kind of like, oh, like now I have nothing going on this year, like how am I ever going to like find something to do? And then, you know, I remember looking at the end of that year, looking back on the stuff that I would have missed out on had I done the tour, and just being like kind of like feeling very gratified that things had kind of gone the way that they had. And like for me, it was kind of closing a door on, pop touring is a huge part of this business, especially for people in their 20s and 30s. But I kind of took that as a moment to refocus maybe on the recording side of things, or things that like I wouldn't have to fall backwards into. Like I feel like I maybe am deserving of these opportunities in that world, and I feel a little more secure pursuing it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when I started picking up some extra instruments and just like kind of planting the seeds of how do I get to that, if I can't be doing this other thing.
Yeah, it's funny how those like I wanted to say this earlier and I totally forgot. Like your publishing deal and your touring, they're like side quests. It's like all these things that you do on the way, they inform like what you end up ultimately doing and what your tastes are and stuff like that. So people just have to remember that like sometimes shit sucks, but then on the other side it's probably better. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I love it. And last question is, what right now is your current biggest goal, and what's the next smallest thing you're going to do to go towards it?
Well, personally, I'm working on the fourth of these presidential records. This one's about Abraham Lincoln.
As it should be.
Yes, it should be. So I just did my drums 2 weeks ago, and now I'm kind of digging in on the production of that. And I should mention too, like because I did kind of get my dream gig about a year and a half ago, playing with an artist that I had like just kind of been a huge fan of since I was in high school. I saw this person play in high school with my guitar teacher, and I remember him telling me like, oh, like maybe like this is the kind of job that like maybe you could have someday, like playing guitar for, it was Aimee Mann. And then
Amazing.
like about a year and a half ago, like I joined her band, and we become close. She really likes the Presidents too. So we've been, so we've got a song together on this new one, which is fun.
That's
for
amazing.
Me. And
that's amazing.
Yeah. And then, I mean, like, I feel like professionally, I would just love to get further into this scoring world. Like I've played on maybe like a couple movies, but it would be cool to have another one of those calls come in, so you just keep answering the phone when it rings.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah. And you've got to shout out your guitar teacher from back in the day, because he's come up so many times.
Yeah, his name's Tyler Campbell, and yeah, he taught me for like 10 years. He passed away a few years ago, unfortunately, but yeah, he had sent a bunch of people to Berklee. We're still friends now, so I think yeah, like he definitely like left a bit of an impact, and he was able to at least see me move out here, and like he knew that I was hopefully going to be all right.
That's awesome. I just, so many people have that like instructor like early on, like my guitar teacher who also passed away a couple years ago. His name was Scott Olin. They just have such an impact on kids, and they just like,
totally.
They just help so many people, and then they just kind of, nobody ever knows, but that's what they love. But anyway, dude, this has been a ton of fun. Please let everybody know where they can find you if they want to work together, if they want to listen to the Presidents. Go for it.
Yeah, my name is Adam Tressler, so I have adamtressler.com, which has all kinds of links and examples of my playing. Instagram at Adam Tressler. Just no surprises there. If you look for me, you'll find me.
Awesome. I'll have links in there. And dude, it's good to see your face. We'll have to.
Yeah,
I got to hire you to play some guitar. I just need something for you to play guitar on.
Yeah, now we're talking.
Now we're getting somewhere. Awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Travis.
So that's it for episode 88. Thanks to Adam Tressler for coming on the show. Please check him out. Thanks to all of you for listening. And thanks to Stephen Boyd for the audio edit on this one. As usual, if you've been getting value out of the show, if you've been enjoying it, the most supportive thing you could possibly do for me is to share the show with a friend and to subscribe on YouTube or in the podcast player of your choice. So with that, I will see y'all next time.